It's time for the Movie Raid movie review, and tonight I'm going to talk about The Crow, City of Angels, starring Vincent Perez as Ash, or the next Eric Draven, so to speak. And I want to talk about the story itself. It involves a man and his kid. They both get brutally murdered by a bunch of gangsters or misfits, or however you want to see them as. Basically, they're not good people. And we see them come back. And lo and behold, here he is, another Eric Draven type character. And we see that he takes his vengeance on the people that killed him and his kid. Now, what makes this film a little bit more different in the first film? I would say the environment definitely makes you feel like it's an outworldly look as far as the city goes. It's kind of modern, but it's not modern. It looks very outworldly, like everything's gone to chaos. Nothing but violence, nothing but fires and drug addicts and people doing drugs and sex and all this stuff that has been probably going on forever, and that's like the new normal. So, and we see, even one of the characters that go visits a establishment that involves women getting undressed by a person, putting a coin in and watching the show. So I will say the atmosphere is definitely different, and I like that. I like that it makes you feel that it's something else. It makes that as its own foreground of character to the main character as Ash on what he's trying to accomplish. Now, character-wise, first of all, I love the fact that Iggy Pop is in this. It always plays a good bad guy, and you can tell he's serious about it, and I just love how he is in this film. And I love the fact that we see that Sarah from the first film, not the same actress from the first film, but the character Sarah, who comes back and remembers Eric Draven from the first film. Now, she's carrying the actual ring that Shelley and Eric both shared when they were alive. And, Eric gave it to Sarah. And we see that it's a little cameo, a little nudge to as far as The Crow goes. And I like the fact that she's kind of a subtle character in this one. She doesn't play, a major kind of angelic character like, what we saw in the first Crow as, Eric Draven of what he was sought out to do. So Ash in this one does the same thing, and we see quite a bit of, killing involved in this, and, it does have the same scenario, vengeance, kill the people that killed them, a big overlord or warlord, whichever the case may be. It's not really a big difference when it comes to that aspect in this film. It's not like that changing of that, but I do like how that it almost reminds you like a gothic version of Mad Max in a way. Seeing how everybody's definitely differently more I would say a little bit of an evil characteristic to all these characters, but they're all kind of like lowlifes. So this is basically, once again, the new normal. Everything's all violent. Everything's all about drugs and sex. So, and again, they brought the music aspect from the first film, as we saw. The concert and the soundtrack. Now, let me talk about the soundtrack real quick. The soundtrack is good. I like the soundtrack. I think it's pretty cool. And I don't think that it kind of differs away from this sequel. Now, The Crow, City of Angels, I consider as a sequel because it does involve somebody else. But what I don't really like about this is that it sports the whole same look as Eric Draven. Now, I don't know what they would have chosen to make it be different for the next person who comes in, from back from the dead to kill the people that killed them. but I just didn't feel comfortable that he just sports the same exact look as Eric Draven. Now, Eric Draven sport that look from that film because that was his persona, that was his taste of how he dressed, of how, what he chose to wear, and so forth. In this film, it's kind of like if he was, Spawn sporting the same thing with a different variant, you know what I'm saying? So I just didn't really care the fact of what he looked like in this film. And it just kind of copied too much of the first film, The Crow. It copied too much of it. Now, yes, it's called The Crow, City of Angels. Yes, someone does come back from life and, takes vengeance. But again, it's too copy and paste on that part of the story. And it doesn't make the story really that different. Now, there's familiar faces in this film. I like that. I like that each one is, not a good person in this film. They're all bad. And, there's really no sense of goodness from any kind of character in this film except for one main goal, one main objective in this. And it does bring back the gothic aspect. It does, which I mentioned before. It does make it outwardly, make it different. But that's pretty much the only real aspects of The Crow, City of Angels that I see in this film. I don't hate it. I don't think it's the worst film. I don't think it has any worst acting in it. I don't think it has really, anything negative to where what you would expect in any sequel of any franchise or just even any sequel itself. Because oftentimes when you see a sequel from something that is already popular from the first film, it normally doesn't do as well or normally would succeed but doesn't have the same expectations as the first film did, right? Well, in this case, this film had the right concept but didn't quite make a mark as far as being different as a different Crow film. Now, there are other Crow films just like this. They all sport the same look, the same type of character on all of them. Now, I appreciate the fact that, the face paint and so forth. I mean, it's memorable. It's great. But, like, every person who dies, tragically, like, they just magically become this. Like, it's not like it's the same vessel and someone dies and then someone takes over that same person or anything like that. And, I just kind of, I find it a little bit problematic when it comes to that. It doesn't really change my way of perspective on this film itself because Ash looks just like Eric Draven. No, I don't have a problem with that as far as a whole on the film. I do like the film. I don't think it's the worst film, and I don't think that it should be trash, per se. I think it does well on its own in comparison to some of the other Crow films. Because all the other Crow films did have different concepts. And one of them included being modern-day times, and it was in broad daylight. It looked way too normal. And the fact that, one of the, quote, Eric Dravens, if you want to call it that, in one of the Crow films, like, there's a scene where, he talks to his bandmates and they don't recognize him. What? How they not recognize him for a whole year? You just magically forgot what he looked like, huh? So, like, just, like, certain things like that in sequels of The Crow just kind of, like, it doesn't set right with me on that. But obviously no one is going to beat the original The Crow, which inspired the reboot. And I never saw the reboot, just what the preview's shown, and the only thing I can say about the reboot as far as the trailer goes from what I've seen on that, I just wasn't too crazy about the fact that it was just too normal, The people were too normal. They were just acting like it was just another day, And that, to me, it just differs away from what The Crow really is. Now, we all know the story about how The Crow became. Now, I'm going to give you a short version of this. James O'Barr, the original creator of The Crow, obviously made a comic book of The Crow. Now, in the comic book version, he was, Eric Draven was much, much more brutal, much more, sadistic. Well, I would probably not sadistic per se, but definitely a killer, and would definitely send the people that caused them pain to their grave for sure. And that's what made this film, The Crow, becoming a romance but vengeance story. And, that's what made that film. That's what made this magical and, you know, opened a lot of doors as far as concepts go, like the gothic aspect. So that's, to me, the gothic aspect of The Crow, City of Angels. I felt that definitely, fits very well for this, Now, as far as Ash, the character, I felt that, he's a little different. He's not too different in comparison. If I were to compare Eric Draven and Ash, well, obviously Ash is wearing the same thing. But I felt that, Ash had just a little bit different power, but you could tell they didn't go too far away from the Crow concept. But, I don't hate this film. If I were to give this a ranking out of a 10, I would definitely give this a 6.5 out of a 10 for sure. It's worthy to watch. It may not be a fan favorite per se, but it's definitely worth a look. And, as far as owning a copy of this movie, there's nothing wrong with that either, because it's just one of those, hey, cool, and then watch it and then you're done. If, again, it's not a bad movie, and I just felt that it could have been a little bit better with the concept on. It could have been a little bit darker, but, it fits well for the concept for what it was, and the soundtrack is good, and actors were good. But it just felt too copy and paste. I've seen it, move on, type of ordeal. So